neutrality, but a balanced position, not quite one side or the other. So we're not, on one side we might have a very much a, what's the word, not quite fanatical view of frameworks and say my framework's the best and yours sucks and all that. So we're not on that side of the spectrum. And on the other side, there are some who believe, well, you don't need any frameworks to scale, and just put a team together and scaling will happen magically. And ours is more sort of a middle view or via media, if you will, that from Agile from the center of that, not quite on one side or the other extreme. What is the balance view that we can take to move this forward and scale Agile? And then when we're talking about scaling, we're essentially talking about taking Agile methods and not just scaling them to multiple teams, but also scaling a transformation in terms of its maturity and moving the needle towards business agility. Right? So we can talk about Agile, and we can talk about how long it's been around and such, but really we're talking about business agility. That's sort of the goal that most organizations are starting to move towards nowadays. You guys have all seen or at least encountered LitheSpeed, but one of the things that we've been super proud of is that as as the years tick by and as the decades thus tick by, and some of you guys have been our clients and friends all through, we're starting to get recognized for that common sense, pragmatic view. So we've been given a couple of awards of which we're pretty happy, and this is mostly because of our customers and their success. Number one, last year we were rated as the most innovative Agile consulting company, and this year we've been rated as, well, actually before that, this is the most promising Agile company. Bob, can you talk a little bit about our mission? You always say it best.
Sure. So yeah, I enjoy the mission. So we, I like to sort of think about this as I'm trying to design new offerings and work with people. And our mission is to make people's work more valued, productive, and fulfilling. And we do that in many different ways. Obviously, this is community outreach. Meetup, we run conferences throughout the year, or at least they won't be in person this year, but we do run conferences. And then obviously we have training, coaching, and consulting. And I always say we can either, I like to impact people. If I can do that by helping the organization move towards more agility, great. If I can help that by making the person want to move to an organization that is more agile, that's great as well.
All right. Thank you, Bob.
Sure.
Never a dull moment. Right, there we go. So quick introduction to myself. Arlen Bankston, who's my co-founder, he's on the call today. So he and I started LitheSpeed 13 years ago in 2007. And like Lisa, I like dogs. Unfortunately, I don't have one. My kids keep bugging me for one. And my excuse has always been I travel too much. But now that I'm not traveling, maybe we will have a dog. And then my favorite ice cream flavor is pistachio. Lisa, how about you? Quick word of introduction to you.
Oh, I hate to admit it, but my favorite ice cream flavor is just plain vanilla. Just good vanilla ice cream.
And then we have Roland and
vanilla bean.
Yeah. All right, so the three of us are going to talk to you today about some challenges with middle management layer that they're facing, not challenges with them, but challenges that middle layer faces. And then we want to talk about a reorganization of organizations from a more hierarchical, siloed, Conway's rule exhibiting type organization to a network organization. And then introduce this construct called the Agile Value Management Office, or VMO. And then specifically spend a few minutes, well, actually several minutes, talking about these two topics. One, about how this VMO can drive flow across the organization. And then the other as to how the VMO can help agile teams and the entire organization deliver value in line with business outcomes or customer outcomes. And then we have, which says Q&A towards the end, but honestly, we'll have Q&A all through, so feel free to ask your questions. It's a pretty relaxed group over here. We'll also have 2 breakout room discussions, so you guys will get to chime in and put in your thoughts around flow and value and how you're driving this. Roland, you want to talk about this, our next upcoming project over here, labor of love, if you will?
Yeah. We've got a couple of authors in the company. Sanjiv's had a book out for quite some time. Arlen Bankston's got one out on HR, and we've just been signed up to deliver another one, probably in the coming year, 2021, with Barrett Cuellar will be our publisher. But it's a whole book really around transitioning from the PMO to this value management office, the VMO model. And some of the things we're going to be talking about in that book are down below. They're organizing around value streams and managing the flow of value through the organization and using economics kind of at the feature level or MMP level and some funding and governance things. And yeah, really looking forward to it. It's a great notion. It's one that our customers seem to be really attracted to. So we thought we should probably put more detail into how it all works.
All right, cool. And as I want to introduce some of these challenges, and then Lisa, give me a sort of visual signal as to when you want to do your Mentimeter quiz. All right, so, okay. So who has an organization, if you want to use your reaction button or visually put your hands up or wave it or clap or whatever, has an organization that has this water, scrum, fall model, right? There's a guy called Mick Kirsten, so he's written that great book, Project to Product. And in that book, he quotes Nationwide Insurance and others. Nationwide Insurance is a client of ours. And they had measured that if you look at lead times from end to end, so if you're looking at the slide and looking from extreme left to extreme right, from conceptualization of an idea or the concept of an idea, actually delivering it in production, only 4% of that entire cycle, only 4% is actually spent in development. So this is actually not to scale. So it's probably something like this, the development piece is just really short and really a small percentage, less than 5% of the entire end-to-end lead time. And there's a long sort of fuzzy front end, if you will, and then a lagging, deployment end. And even if we have an agile team and the team is super agile and mature and does extreme programming and DevOps stuff and all that, the truth is most organizations, unless they're product organizations that are wired from the beginning to operate in a very adaptive and agile way, most organizations can't really leverage the investment in agile teams. So even with mature agile and IT teams, a true end-to-end agility requires a wider organizational transformation. We know that, we say that, and some of our leading methodologies purport to give us the means to do that, but change is very, very difficult. Right? We know that, that's a truism. And one of the things that is very, very difficult is to rewire the organization or reorganize the organization itself so that we can move towards business agility. And underlying that is the inherent problem that we're dealing with, something that we call Conway's law, that says the organizations are constrained to match, the communication structures, the designs of the systems are constrained to match the organization structures themselves. So if we have a siloed organization, we have a very sort of, siloed system. And likewise, if we end up with this sort of industrial age, take something and pass it over the wall, we end up with really very sort of rigid, hidebound cultures and a very unadaptive system and a very, striated system architecture. So both of those are sort of mirror problems of each other. So I want to get a show of hands from you guys. Whose organization looks like this? I mean, you might have agile teams, but it takes a long time to get funding, takes a long time to deploy stuff into production. Put your hands up if you got something like this. All right, that's Steve, and let's see, who else?
I'll put my hand up on behalf of my current client.
So I'm sure Peter's seen a lot of this. Peter, tell us what it looked like from your vantage point.
I mean, let's use Comcast as an example. I mean, it's a vast organization. Even if you just take the 8,000 folks that I was helping to look after and work with Agile, this is a perfect representation of how it works, right? Mm-hmm. This whole front-end requirements and planning and the whole, development handoff, acceptance operations piece, that's where the vast majority of the work gets delayed.
Yep.
Most teams can run iterations and sprints no problem at all and produce quality. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, it's almost as though we need to start tying in the human aspect here and talk about some human-centric change management, with practices like ProSci and some of the work that they're doing, and combine it with Agile and Lean,
right,
to move the iterative into the value in the first stage. Because I'm sure you've all sat down with your product owners and they've said, we've only got 375 million requirements that need to be done by Tuesday. And then when you ask them, so which ones are the most value to the business, they all go away with a puzzled look on their face.
Or they say all of them.
All of them, yeah. The executive team said all of these are.
Yeah. All right. Anybody else have a comment like that to either support or counter that view that Peter gave us? Okay. So that ends up pressuring our folks in the middle. So we might have teams, and teams will have scrum masters and engineers and business analysts and testers. So that's if you have an agile team, and if you don't have an agile team, straight developers and such. And then as we get a little higher, you go from project manager to program manager to director, and that's kind of the level we were talking about. Somebody who's like got that title manager or director, maybe not quite an executive level, VP. Once you hit the VP level, you're dealing with a different ballgame over there. But the folks who are in that middle layer are getting hit from all sides, right? They're getting hit from all sides because whether we like it or not, and other than a few of them, many of them are late to the Agile game, right? And if, let's say, I'm a director in an organization and I want to get trained on Agile, which class do I go to? Do I go to a Scrum Master class? Do I go to a SA class? Within the Agile community, we ourselves have not been very good about providing the folks in that, in that middle layer with the appropriate learning and education and upskilling that they need to not only learn Agile, because you can go to the Scrum Master class and you can go to an introduction to Agile class and you can learn the basic mechanics of Agile, but you don't necessarily learn what your role is and how to play a value-adding part in this larger game, right? And so we end up with a situation where we have executives and they're generally undergone to cut costs, increase revenue, whatever. And so they come in and say, all right, make it so number one. And poor number one has no idea what to do, right? So should I go take a class? Should I, so number one turns around and passes stuff down the chain. It's like, all right, make it so number two, number three, right? So what we end up with is more of a command and control type of situation. And our middle managers may not know how to sort of move things forward. So some of you mentioned that you were the PMO. The PMO is under attack. We've got a customer who says in their organizations, as the organization itself moves towards Agile, quote unquote, this is the phrase that he used verbatim. He said, our project managers are running for their lives. Right? And this is not the way it should be, because our project managers have skills, they have value-adding skills, and one of the things that we want to do is to make sure that we can identify how project managers, PMOs, and others in this middle management layer can overcome some of these challenges and play a really value-adding role. And for that, we need to shift and introduce this notion of an Agile Value Management Office. So whether it's a lack of sponsorship, unclear vision that's coming from the top, or we've just gotten comfortable. I work for my promotion, I got these notches on my on my belt, and I've been promoted, and I'm kind of happy. Or I just have no idea what how things are going. I'm looking at my Gantt chart, but my Gantt chart is not telling me what the situation on the ground is actually, right? Or maybe I got comfortable with sort of micromanagement and sort of servant leadership. So these are some challenges that we need to talk about overcoming. And Lisa, feel free to interrupt me when it's time for the Mentimeter quiz. All right. But is it time now? Okay, go for it. So Lisa's going to quiz us before we jump into our first.
Sure. I thought I had a slide prompt, but I'll just jump in there if you want. So I'm going to knock Sanjiv off of sharing and share my own screen. So if you were in here for the earlier part, you kind of know how this works. But we're going to do a quick, sorry, Zoom is being overly careful about me knocking Sanjiv off of here.
No, I stopped sharing.
So what we're going to do, and hopefully you guys just give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen. If you haven't got this open already, if you go to www.menti.com and type in this code 111834, you'll see this. You'll have the opportunity to enter some words, and we're going to create a word cloud just to get a sense of where folks are in their organizations in terms of their leadership role, what kinds of things you tend to do in your day-to-day. So I'm not sure what the word count is, but if you don't know how word clouds work, the more often a word is entered by the group, the bigger it will appear. And then as we start getting inputs, hopefully we will see this word cloud start to emerge, and it will give us a better sense of who's in the audience and what our perspectives are, and the typical kinds of things that we face in our day-to-day as whether we're middle managers or individual contributors, sort of where we are in the organization there. So we'll just give you a couple of minutes. Looks like we've got 20 some odd folks in the call. We have 10 responses so far. Lots of trainers, it looks like, and coaches. Maybe another minute or so, give you guys a chance to wrap it up. Sanjiv, looks like we have our audiences coming together here with in terms of
right. So I'm looking at consultant, trainer, coach being probably the most in number, and then we have some scrum masters, software engineer, engineering manager. 25 years. What is that? That's kind of interesting.
25 years in IT.
Oh, 25 years in IT.
Oh, we have a TPM. Yay. That's how I entered the Agile world, was as a TPM.
Engagement manager, operations. That's great. All right. All right. Well, thanks for sharing that.
Who's the circus manager?
A circus manager?
We have a stable genius on the phone too. Bob, was that you?
Probably the same person.
All right, let's sort of settle down over there. So let's jump back in. And so it turns out, and I saw one executive director over there. So it seems like we might have one person in the upper sort of echelon over there in that executive team. But most folks over here, most of us, sounds like we're in the middle management or the team level. Right? And the other thing I didn't see was whether folks are on the business side or IT. I saw one or two folks in the operations. But the big gap that we need to overcome is this separation or chasm between business and IT. Or more granularly, it's overcoming functional specialties. So whether sales or marketing or legal, those of us who come from an IT background, you sort of see those as one thing. It's like, oh yeah, we're talking about the business, but there's no such thing as the business because they don't think of themselves as the business. They're thinking of themselves as marketing or sales or legal or some functional HR, some functional specialty, right? And even within IT, we have functional specialties of our own. We might have development and testing and analysis and DevOps and all this kind of stuff, right? So one of the things that we have to do is how to find a way to go from end to end across all of those organizational silos. Silos on the business side, and then silos on the IT side, right? And so what our goal now is to create this network of teams, a team of teams, if you will. So some of you might be familiar with Stanley McChrystal. He's the general who led the U.S. fight in Iraq and put together a whole disparate set of players, everything from the intelligence services to the military to the civilians, and pull them all together and had them go across end to end, right? And the way they did it was with this concept of a team of teams. So what we want to do is to figure out how to create this team of teams that will help us bridge those gaps, even if the organization doesn't necessarily change. So can we put an Agile VMO, Value Management Office, in place, and then have representatives from each one of those organizations as part of this middle management layer? The other thing is we also want to have executive representation. So we will have executives as part of this middle management team of teams. And then just so that we're not just disconnected and we're just not creating yet another management group, there's a concept of linking pin. And now this is a management concept that's been around since the 1960s. And it's actually from one of those British management schools. And they said, if you wanted to sort of overcome these layers or these separations and between hierarchy, the best thing you can do is to have one person be part of both those layers. So we have this concept of an elected representative. We can have team members who are part of the Agile VMO. We can have VMO members who are part of the executive team. Now that's a radical concept because when in a Frederick Taylor scientific management type of or hierarchical organization, we don't think like that. We think of boxes, right? We're going to put boxes and layers. We're going to put people in the boxes. We'll put the boxes in a layer, and then the stuff's just going to go from top to bottom. And we call that a chain of command. Well, this is an adaptive organization. And so the first thing we do to change that, to change that group from a hierarchical, top to bottom things to put a team of teams together, all right? So I'm going to stop there. And since I introduced this concept, and I'm going to show a video over here. And the video is going to tell us what are some of the things that we need to consider when we put this network of teams together. So top 5 things to know about our network of teams.
I'm Tom Merritt for Tech Republic. Here are 5 things to know about a network of teams. You may have heard the phrase network of teams kicking around. It's often described as a non-hierarchical way of organizing your workforce. So, how would you build this, and what good would it do you? Here are 5 things to know about a network of teams. Number 1, you'll need a map. Take all your current practices, include every employee, and map out how everything you do gets done. This will start to indicate what kinds of teams you will need to cover the things you need to get done. You might even try a technique called Organizational Network Analysis, or ONA, to identify what networks are in place already. Coming in at number 2, give the teams their purpose. Once you've identified where you need teams, then you should write up a description of what tasks you want a particular team to execute and what skills are needed from the team members to do that. Each team should know what the organization's goal is and what their goal is as a part of that. Up to number 3, decentralize the decision making. Let teams lay out their own roadmap to success. Remember, you gave them the tasks, let the team decide how to accomplish them. Sliding in at number 4, provide the infrastructure. Each team's members are responsible for budgeting, hiring, and communicating with other teams, so make sure to give them the tech tools they need to do that efficiently, and provide the transparency and visibility to help them get the information they need. At number 5, try, learn, and try again. Let the team make mistakes, and let the teams figure out how to correct them. And don't be afraid to disband a team and create new ones as your needs change. Teams are a natural way for people to work. If you set up the system to make it clear where to aim and give them the resources to do it, you may all get better at hitting the target. Hey, there's more where that came from too. Check out our other videos and articles at techrepublic.com. I'll see you there.
All right. So we want to set up a team of teams, and we want to make sure that we provide the teams with everything that they need. One of the things that we have to do is to establish flow as quickly as possible. So this is not just flow within a work within a team. This is the flow of work that helps us manage demand. We always have much more demand than we have capacity. So let's say we have 3 teams or 30 teams, or maybe if you have 300 teams, believe it or not, you're always going to have more demand, right? So it's a question of managing that work in process and regulating that demand and making sure that we have something akin to a smoothly flowing highway, unlike this one that's gridlocked. So if you look at this highway over here, the utilization of this highway is close to 100%. And when that utilization passes, if you look to the bottom of the slide, when it passes an 80% threshold, there's something called Little's Law in lean theory. And it tells us that the cycle time just goes through the roof. It just takes too long to go from point A to point B. And so if we are looking at any portfolio of projects or any portfolio of programs, it typically looks like this. So one of the best things that an Agile VMO or this middle management group can do is to start to put some structure around limiting work in process. This is usually well beyond a team's purview or influence or sphere of influence. And our executives don't necessarily know these concepts, and they don't necessarily know how to do it. So one of the best ways to start to get that traffic flowing or the projects flowing or value being delivered is to actually make sure that we can start to get flow in place. So I got another quick video for you guys, and then we'll jump into our discussion. So the question is, no video. All right, I'm going to skip over this because I think Jesse's giving me the evil eye over here, telling me he might be running out of time. So I'll come back and do this later.
It only takes.
Oh, it's right here. Never mind. Sorry, Dave.
She's good at that.
All right.
It only takes a tap on the brakes to start a traffic jam. The next person brakes, and soon you have a shock wave of stop and go. Similarly, anyone can prevent them. Just travel at a steady speed, a safe distance from the car ahead of you, and avoid braking unless necessary. You'll become a shock absorber in the system, but most people don't do this. Artificial intelligence may be a solution. Researchers have shown that AI can learn to manage traffic by controlling just a few autonomous vehicles. They tested their system on figure 8s. When the scientists replaced just one of the 14 human-driven cars with an AV controlled by one of their algorithms, average car speed doubled. On ramps, replacing 10% of the cars doubled the number of cars passing through. For bottlenecks, replacing 10% of the cars increased throughput by more than 20%. In city grids, where the AI controlled lights, not cars, giving an algorithm control improved flow by 7%. Until we have self-driving cars controlling traffic for us, drivers can learn this from AI. Keep your distance and brake less. That's smart driving.
All right. Keep your distance and brake less. So on one hand, our Agile VMO can help us regulate the demand and limit work in process. But even when we have work that's flowing into the system, the thing that we have to make sure is that our teams, and here we have, for example, 3 teams over here, and we have a prioritization of what's the work coming in, and then apply the elephant principle. You guys know what the elephant principle is? How do you eat an elephant?
One piece at a time.
One bite at a time. How do you eat a large project? One MVP at a time. Like one minimum viable product or one chunk at a time. So this is the essence of Mick Kerson's thesis, where he says, that there's a popular thing that's buzzword, project to product. Well, we need to take a large project and chunk it down into smaller products. And that's going to allow us to pivot from project to product. We regulate the demand, work on smaller chunks, prioritize them, queue them up, and then have our dedicated teams work on them one at a time. So that's our keeping the distance and breaking less. It's time for our first discussion here. our Zoom discussion. And this is about your ideas and how we can drive flow from the center. We have some thoughts over here as a manager or executive, how you can have an integrated VMO of people across all of those of those layers of management. A great segue into the next part of it is not just driving flow, but also talking about value. Peter, you talked about focus on the product and leaving sort of the outcomes, if you will, to the mercy of a chance, if you will. So one of the big things that a VMO can do is to start to educate executive management and align teams and lead teams in driving value, and then through portfolio prioritization and big room planning. I don't know that we have time for big room planning, but Roland, you want to talk about LPM and portfolio prioritization and take these slides?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the ways to break this the stratification and between the various tiers is to bring everyone together, right? So this notion of a VMO is really sort of not only a cross-functional leadership team, but a cross-level leadership team where we've got perhaps some senior executives, middle managers, and then folks who are down in the trenches trying to get work done, and bringing them all together to try to get work flowing through the portfolio. And there's a couple of different kinds of work that we need to manage, that this group needs to manage. We talked, Sanjiv showed the video of the traffic, and so of course we want to get value to flow through the organization and into the hands of customers as soon as possible. And hopefully that also results in value flowing back to us in terms of revenue or cost savings or whatever. But we know that there are a lot of breaks in the organization that are designed to stop work from going forward. So part of the VMO's job is to be willing to question the status quo and change how things get done from a process standpoint, and get rid of all of these breaks and gates and documents and stuff like that that keep things from moving forward. Now, once we can get some of those barriers out of the way, we can start to do something like in the upper right of this picture here. I can take big products or big projects and break them down into individual features or requirements or capabilities and start to manage them as units of value in and of themselves. And one of our customers, one that Lisa was supporting for a while, talked about really getting to feature level economics or monetizing at the feature level. Which features drive the most value to us and to our customers? Which features cost the least? And that's where the sweet spot is finding features that are valuable to our customers and valuable to us, but don't cost a lot to implement or take a long time to implement. And those are the ones we want to push forward. So this is one of our customer value management walls here. There's a lot of requests here on the far left in terms of what folks want, but you can see that as the columns move towards the right there, there's fewer and fewer cards in those columns. And somebody is saying no, and saying that, the economics of that particular request don't make any sense. And kind of using economics to figure out which are the features that we should move forward. What should we say yes to? And there should be an economic reason for why we're saying yes to it. All right. I think we can go on, Sandy.
This little, the concept of big room planning, and I'll play the video.
Sure. So the idea here now is that I've got lots of pieces of value that are hitting lots of different teams that are coming through the portfolio, and we may need to get alignment across a bunch of folks. This is another one of these, not only is it a cross-functional gathering, but a multi-layer gathering where I've got executives and folks on the teams coming together to plan their work.
Whether that's mobile or web, we'll just add additional benefit, and we will start to see those calls that we're trying to drive out of this.
Going to describe the structure and how it works.
Yeah, this is planning an entire value stream's worth of work. This is maybe about 20 agile teams or so. I think there were somewhere in between 300 and 400 people in this planning session, where executives came forward and gave the goals for the organization for the next quarter, gave them objectives that they wanted to try to achieve in the quarter, and turn the teams loose to come up with their plans. So really pushing a lot of decision-making down, giving the teams the problems and letting them solve those problems, and bringing executives and team members together in the same place at the same time to have dialogue. It's a very, very powerful technique. I like it a lot.
Okay. Would you advocate potentially bringing customers into these kind of conversations as well?
That would be interesting. It's a great idea. I think if you had some friendly customers or ones where you have a good relationship and they could, I don't think we have any problem hearing from the customers. There's usually more of an issue of, do we want the customers to see how the sausage is made, or to potentially see that their requests are not getting prioritized? Because one of the things that comes out of this is saying no. So if you're okay saying no to your customer while they're there, then maybe it might work out. You have to be a little careful with that, I think.
Yeah, it's more along the lines of, you know, you could interact with your customer base in real time to look at prioritization. And then to your point, you don't want to show them the entire sausage factory, but maybe the starting point where you can look at it and say, you know, these are the challenges we would face in delivering this to you. Is it that important to you that you're willing to wait 3 months, or you're willing to pay X for it, et cetera, et cetera? Customers may change their mind, but to your point, you'd need friendly customers because it could get pretty adversarial.
Exactly, yeah.
All right, so
I like it.
So on that thought, we have our closing breakout room towards the end, where you guys get to talk about how you think that you might want to drive value from the center. So we'll do another breakout room, and then we'll come back and we'll close. Just want to keep respect your schedule and get you back to your families. So I want to get the next